Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. This week we discovered a new power within the Dreadnought. Following its source eventually led us to a new exotic weapon, the Barodyad, aka the supposed proto-weapon of sorrow, aka the Wheel, aka the Frisbee of Malice, aka the Barrow Boomerang. The story of this little SMG shows us what happened when a particularly powerful hive warrior from Zivur Arath's brood entered the Dreadnought. But their story is just a backdrop to a greater mystery within this terrible ship, and a greater question of who wields the real power here. But first, have you heard of food? No, I'm not talking about some kind of bag of chips, I mean real food. Raid and Dungeon Race season has just finished, and well, they tend to bring out the more primal side of us gamers, but that also means we completely forget about how to make a proper, nutritious meal. It's okay to admit it, Heresy released and I turned back into a little gremlin. It's better than the final shape, where I was a cross between a London fox and a Nashville raccoon, but still, it wasn't great. Luckily, I can help myself, and so can you, with HelloFresh, where you can get nutritious meals delivered to you, which are easy to prepare. HelloFresh has over 30 options each week to help you break out of the gremlin mold, including vegetarian, calorie smart, and more. You can customize your deliveries as well, giving you a chance to match your lifestyle and keep things refreshing when life calls for it. And, as if you needed more reason to give HelloFresh a try, they're giving you free breakfast. As long as your subscription is active, you'll get one delicious breakfast item with every delivery box. So, what are you waiting for? Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Go to my link and use my code in the description and receive 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. That's one breakfast item per box while your subscription is active if you're in the US. The link and code are valid in all countries and the respective local discount will apply. So, where does Barodyad's story really start? Well, as with many things in Heresy, it starts with a secret on the Dreadnought. In particular, a blight found within the Hall of Souls near the Court of Oryx. This blight actually pulls you in when you get close, and inside that blight, we find the first of many taken osseous fragments. Veterans of the franchise will note the similarity between these and the calcified fragments of the Taken King era, fragments which, when collected in their multitudes, led us to the Touch of Malice. These fragments, however, are riddled with Taken energy, and have the same kind of tentacle growths all over them that are common to the Dreadnought now in its more infested state. It should be noted that in the process of the quest leading up to Barodyad, the exotic quest itself, and the catalyst quest that comes afterwards, we obtain a total of 19 osseous fragments, or at least that's how many we've obtained thus far. Touch of Malice required us to obtain 45, and more importantly, the entire Books of Sorrow were spread out across some 50 fragments, so I don't doubt that there may be many more beyond the initial 19 we've collected. Taking our first fragment all the way back to Sloane at the shaping slab in Eris's quarters brings us the next revelation for our pursuit. The energy signature that is resonating through the osseous fragment is twinned. The specific words from Sloane that matter are as follows. Strong readings of Taken energy. Not surprising, she says. Here's the interesting part. This, she taps the fragment, has not one but two specific energy signatures. Siohan says it's in some sort of quantum dyadic state. Two things at once, somehow. Apparently, one thing hidden beneath the other is a little too simplistic for how they're interlaced, but it's close enough. Keep that whole thing about the idea of this being a pair of things in one in your mind. It matters for later. Following on from this, though, we investigate the energy signature being given off by this osseous fragment, and as it turns out, it does show up at other places in the system, the first of which is Sorrow's Harbor on the Moon. This begins a lot of trekking around the system as we track this signal, and in the process of tracking it, we find more osseous fragments which then continue to strengthen the signal, which gives us more of a clue of where to look. The first place we go is the Lost Sector at Sorrow's Harbor, and it's from here that we're able to use the scotopic runes we've learned by mastering the Path of Resolve to locate deeper hive secrets. In particular, the Hive's secret found within the area of a lost sector near the Sorrow's Harbor part of the moon is yet another one of these osseous fragments. And from there, we're able to follow the signal to another location, Vayli's Labyrinth in the Cosmodrome, another Hive lost sector. There we recovered a third osseous fragment deep within the catacombs. With 3 fragments down, it turns out that there are more of them, and with more fragments, more of the signal can be pinpointed. But Sloan gave us an update. The fragments that we'd collected so far were fair enough, and it meant that we were able to pinpoint something, namely 3 more fragments. But apparently, these ones were guarded and their signals quickly went cold. Whilst the previous 3 fragments were either hidden or had been warded by Hive runes and rituals, these new osseous fragments were hidden and protected by taken wards, or curses. In order to free these osseous fragments, we would need to take the power of the Taken, and in particular a series of curses that granted us power. Those were the curses of endurance, urgency, and revenge. They respectively led us back to Sorrow's Harbor on the moon, the Hallowed Grove in the EDZ, and into a crashed ketch on the moon to fight the nightmare of Skolas. With each of the curses cleaned up, the energy signatures leading to the osseous fragments clarified. And surprise, surprise, they led us back to the Dreadnought. Searching throughout the ship would lead us to a series of Hive statues, each one guarded by enemies seeking the source of power behind these fragments for themselves. Killing each of these hunters would allow us to claim their spoils, though, and with that we had 6 fragments in hand. That was enough for us to isolate the source of the signal on the Dreadnought. The Taken path was revealed to us. It was, however, also clear by this point that we were not the only ones seeking this source of power. The signal was calling out to the Dread and the Taken, and as per usual, they would be our primary opponents in this regard. And so it's here where things really start to go down. This is where we enter the exotic quest and the mission Derealize. As we began our mission in earnest, we had our first encounter with Vrisk, a subjugator of the Dread who was conducting what Sloan believed to be a ritual to interface with the Taken power. They would be one of the primary seekers of this Taken energy signature, and would be our primary opposition through the first stages of our journey. As we continued to fight against Vrisk in our initial landing zone, we discovered that the mysterious eyes from earlier had once again returned to the Dreadnought. Their suffocating terror doesn't work like I stated in a prior video, by the way. It turns out you can get to 20 stacks of suffocating terror and then you die. In particular, you die of a heart attack. Pretty thematically cool. The actual cause of death is listed as suffocating terror, but you get my drift. Sloan also asks an important question here. With the witness gone, what rituals do the Dread do? What do they need? To this, I think we can thank Savathun for an answer. Some of the secrets within Sundered Doctrine last week revealed a potential answer to this exact question of what the Dread want in the wake of the witness's death.
Play a game with me, Guardian. Imagine yourself among the Dread, raised by an uncaring god, burdened with duties you never asked for. Always praying for word from the silent thing that made you. How would that feel? A distant leap of imagination for you, I'm sure. They didn't ask to be born into this world. Sad, unloved things, put together so hastily. Now they're searching for a way to make it better. Something to bandage their spiritual boo-boos. But you like them bleeding, don't you? Makes them easier to kill.
So I think it's pretty simple having heard all that. Whilst the Dread in Sundered Doctrine are clearly looking to assert their independence, as we know from the lore tab of the Sparrow, the Dread on the Dreadnought, generally the Dread, are searching for another who might be able to lead them. They are, in a way, just like the Taken, always searching for a power that can command them. As of that moment in the mission, you are racing against time, with both the Taken and the Dread pushing further to discover what lies within the deeper parts of the Dreadnought, where the source of the power is located. As we continued to pursue Verisk, our way was once again blocked by curses of Taken power. However, the Taken power this time was shielding the Subjugator, and so we had to do what we had done before, taking on Taken power through those curses, empowering them through violence and using them to break the wards defending Vrisk. Before we could defeat her completely though, she was transported deep into a pocket of the Ascendant Realm. Then, eyes appeared again from blights that spontaneously formed, and we were pulled in with her. This led to a small fight, and we did defeat the Subjugator, but we were left trapped in the blighted cyst that she had been pulled into. We had to destabilize its wards in order to proceed. This pushed us back out into the Dreadnought's trenchway, and into the path of yet another corrupted osseous fragment, our seventh. Claiming this fragment unwound Taken energies within the ship, and revealed a new path for us to take. A path which brought us down into an as of yet undiscovered part of the Dreadnought, the Invasion Bay. It's something often forgotten, but the Dreadnought is a vessel designed to lay siege to entire civilizations. As a result, it only makes sense that it has its own launch bay for Hive Seeders, each of which is capable of carrying the brood that would have been known as the Blood of Oryx to any world that would rise in opposition to the Taken King. The Seeders have thankfully lain dormant for a decade. They stand as a menacing reminder of the purpose of this vessel, beyond being Oryx's throne world. Speaking of grim reminders, Sloane had more insight to offer us. She noted that the signal we'd been chasing the whole time was no longer oscillating between existing and not existing. It had stabilized. She speculated that this wasn't due to our proximity to it, but rather it was due to the source of the signal itself becoming stronger. Navigating our way through the Invasion Bay walls, we would see that the deeper we went, the more the Hive's superstructure was being overrun with Taken corruption. It's worth remembering that there has always been a strong presence of Taken power on the Dreadnought. After all, it was Oryx's greatest weapon. But it's never been like an infestation. It's always been a bit more of an augmentation to the way the Dreadnought is. From time to time, you would always see pools of Ascendant Plane pockets just lying around on the Dreadnought, but you would never see the focused blights quite like this, just scrambling all over the walls, creating purchase and utterly corrupting everything found within. After a lot of climbing, we eventually found our way to an upper chamber. The upper chamber was covered in Hive runes. The door looks somewhat similar to the one behind which the War Priest could be found in King's Fall. As it would turn out, the chamber was essentially the planar equivalent of an airlock. When engaged correctly, it could be used to connect into the Ascendant Plane and send its contents, or visitors, into the Ascendant Plane. The energy signature was found within the room, and its power was beginning to build to as of yet unparalleled levels. It appeared that we had discovered the focal point of the source. And there, within the chamber, we also discovered what we assumed the source was at first. A small circular weapon lying out on a table, waiting for us to claim it. The Barrow Dyad. Our mission was crucially to deny our enemies the chance to use this source of power, and so we claimed the weapon for ourselves. In that moment, several things happened. We not only claimed the weapon, but we also claimed two objects: a Coalescence of Sorrow, which appears like a physical Hive rune, and a Coalescence of the Knife, which looked like a similarly shaped object, only it was Taken. Before we go any further, it's time for a lore reminder. The Coalescence of the Knife has the word knife in square brackets. When Bungie's narrative team does something weird with the formatting of a bit of lore, that generally means they're trying to communicate something to us. In this instance, where we see the word knife in square brackets, there are moments in the past where something similar to that has happened. Take a look, for example, at the 1000 Voices lore tab, where we also see that Riven has used square brackets before. In the instance of Riven, it's used to imply perhaps that the word we're looking for probably doesn't exist in her experience as it pertains to our language and understanding, and therefore the word being used is the closest possible stand-in that's available for it. After all, Riven is an alien dragon, and so her perspective on things is going to be fundamentally different from our own. It's a way of saying there's more context to this word specifically. With the word knife being the one that's in square brackets, we're probably looking at the term knife as an idea in the lore rather than just a physical object. It's an implication that one has to become sharper and has to become more powerful. There may be a further meaning to it. It might well mean something else. In this same moment, we're also torn between dimensions. We are on the verge of the Taken realms, embracing a degree of their power, their essentia. It leads us to a moment where we can equip the Barodyad, and our objective becomes suddenly far more ominous. It simply reads, "Do what you must. A target must be broken." Destroying the Taken blights in this room begins our battle with the source of our dyad signature. As it turns out, it wasn't the weapon. It was Xur, the dyad warrior. This is one character, and yet it's also two bosses, one of whom is Taken, and the other of whom is not. There's a lot of lore on the Barodyad lore tab to explain this, which we'll read in a moment, but the summary of it is as follows. Xur was a member of Xivu Arath's brood, who went to the Dreadnought to challenge Oryx, as was decreed by the way of the sword logic. He failed, and was taken by the Taken King, but he wasn't completely defeated. Normally, when one is taken, they are bowed and bent and broken. Whoever controls them can then summon them to be used as they would please. But in rare circumstances, such as with Mara and Sloane, one can be taken and can still retain a sense of one's self. This takes an unbelievably large degree of power and resolve and will, as you need to be able to appropriately partition yourself from the rest of the Taken instead of being absorbed into them. This is a moment where you need to not only define your sense of self, but also you can't let yourself slip into the corrupting power, even as tempting as it might be. It appears that Xur also managed to do just this. Normally, when one is taken, one takes up the knife of Taken power and becomes sharper, but Xur, in his unswerving allegiance to the sword logic, refused to do that. After all, he had not earned such power, and as the result, the sword logic decreed that it wasn't his to take. It was given to him. So there were two versions of Xur, one who was taken and one who was not taken. These two forms of Xur were seemingly the source of our signal. Remember the bit at the beginning where the signal was described as quantum dyadic? In other words, it was spontaneously in two places at once, twinned? Well, this is why. The signal originates from Xur. It's just in one instance he is Hive, and in the other instance he is Taken. He is two in one. With the Barodyad in hand, though, we would make short work of this Hive Knight, and quickly we gained the edge in the fight. Then something unexpected happened. When we defeated the Hive version of Xur, only the Taken version remained, and in that moment, perhaps with his will finally broken, Xur's Taken form arose to fight us, but was swallowed up by a blight. As this blight appeared, Xur took on a new shape. When he re-emerged, he was even more powerful than before, and the eyes from earlier began to return with their miasma of suffocating terror. The Taken infestation within the room intensified further, and eventually the only safe place was outside of the chamber. After engaging the chamber's mechanisms, we began a ritual of expulsion and began to banish Xur from this plane back into the Ascendant Realms. We did not defeat him this day. We only managed to repel his presence. These last few moments of the quest are what's so utterly important about the Barodyad story. Xur isn't actually that special past his ability of resolve, but what happened in the moments after we defeated the Hive version of Xur matters intensely. The Taken version of Zerkur submits instantly and takes up a new shape, wields a new knife. But it is crucial to remember that in this moment, this only happens when something is actively able to control the process of taking. That is the real greater power behind all this. This is us essentially getting the closest look possible at how the Taken are made. It would only be closer if we were in the Ascendant Plane to witness such a moment transpire. I think we've only ever seen an instance this instantaneous once or maybe twice before, in particular in the Taken King campaign, when the Primus of the Skyburners and Bax the Gravekeeper were taken, only to be returned to Battleless moments later. But most crucially of all, someone or something did this. It was there to sharpen Zerkur and allow him to take up that new shape. Who that someone or something was isn't known to us, but it is likely that it is the one that is also responsible for the suffocating terror of the eyes, and is also probably either Oryx's spirit returned and empowered by the Echo, or the Winnower. It is also the one that has probably drawn the dread here. It is the one that is responsible for sending out the aversion anchors. It is the one that drew us to this place. I think the real context for all of this comes from the Barrow Dyad lore tab, though. It is from the perspective of Zerkur and from one other speaker who is unnamed. The second speaker's speech is designated by the singular line breaks before and after each sentence it makes. That's more lore notation stuff that I'll go on and explain in just a moment. Also, I don't know this to be the case, but I think that the last moments of this lore tab might occur in the last moments of Zerkur's Hive Self's life, as we put the sword to him and allowed something darker to enter in. Barrow Dyad's lore tab reads as follows. Lay those unquiet thoughts to rest. I, Zerkur of the brood of Xivu Arath, challenged Oryx. He had communed with the deep and fashioned bones of the great worm into his dreadnought. So for the sake of the sword, I challenged him, full of the weight of purpose and the hunger for war that drives us all. Take up the knife. Against my sword, there was swallowing emptiness, a void that should have held stars. I thought myself blind. I thought myself dead, a bone mortar to shape the foundations of eternity. Take up the knife. Oryx took me then, but I did not crave what he offered. Take up the knife. It is shaped like unparalleled victory. If it is not done by my own power, it is not earned. Thus has the sword logic ever been taught to us, and thus I have lived. Take up the knife. And so I have stayed in this dreadnought, living and not living, taken and not taken. It might have been yesterday, it might have been an eon ago. Take, live, kill, live. I am here. I am power, and I am victory. I am the knife itself. Come, take what you need. Your objective, a new weapon. Others come, and to the taken I say, take me if you can. I am Hive. I do not surrender. I do not... We are the knife. There are very few times when something in the lore sends shivers down my spine. This was one of them. I mean, that line, I am power and I am victory, I am the knife itself. I mean, there's quite a few possible conclusions to draw from that entire lore tab, but I think there's only a few you can draw from that one line, and I know what goes immediately to the forefront of my mind. But we'll discuss all of that now. The first possible conclusion to draw from all of this is that These lines are perhaps being stated by the Taken version of Zur-Kur talking to his hive self. That's not impossible, but the voice itself seems a little bit too demanding and direct for a Taken. The Taken do not demand anyone do anything, they only serve. They do not make demands even of themselves. They only have the spirit to be warriors on behalf of someone else. So there are some other possibilities that I think we need to think about, and the first one we should discuss is the possibility of this being Oryx having been returned in spirit with the power of the Echo. Oryx's spirit is meant to have been dredged up by the bones of the Dreadnought this episode, so it's entirely possible that he has returned and claimed his power to take once again. This has some credence given the structuring of old lore in the Grimoire. You see, the old Grimoire cards, particularly from the Taken King, had entries for each individual Taken entity that you could fight, and they would go on to give a short speech that was conducted to that entity. It would then ask them at the end to take up a knife that would make them sharper. For context, and as an example, this is what's said in the Grimoire card for a Taken Knight. You are a knight, ancient warrior elite, dreadful backbone of the hive. You have scarred entire worlds. You have been taken. Set down your sword, put down your boomer. The fight is not yet begun. True immortality awaits you. What vow compels you? What drives you down the long centuries? You fear death, even as you visit nothingness on your foes, even as you gather tribute from your acolytes. You know that one day your strength will be outmatched, and your centuries of slaughter will end. So you practice your guard, you call up walls to protect you. You betray the sword logic. You compromise the totality of your violence. Why protect your ground when you could take your enemies? You need to make your guard into a weapon. There is a knife for you. It is shaped like no more fear. Take up the knife. Hide no more. Take your new shape. Note how the take your new shape bit is repeated in the moment where Zur-Kur transforms. It's actually called out directly in the game's status feed. So the Barrow Dyad sort of follows a similar format to this as well. In particular, the note of take up the knife is repeated about a half dozen times. And so maybe this is to do with Oryx. But there's only one problem with this theory, which is that these Grimoire cards I've just quoted may be related to beings that Oryx took, but there's no proof that it's the Taken King actually speaking here. And it's also debated whether the Taken King was truly the master of the Taken. Even as early as the Taken King expansion, we got notes in the Grimoire from Ikora stating that she did not believe that it was Oryx himself who hollowed out the things he abducted and turned them into their new Taken forms. And it's here that I hesitantly land once more upon my last theory for all of this, which is related to some of those last few words spoken in the lore tab for Barrow Dyad. Namely, take, live, kill, live. I am here, I am power, and I am victory. I am the knife itself. Come, take what you need, your objective, a new weapon. It should be no surprise that this moment points me towards the idea that the entity that might have laid its eyes upon Zur-Kur and claimed him in that moment was the fabled Winnower. Ever since the unveiling lore was revealed to us, we have seen the note about how the Winnower and the Gardener disagreed with each other, and that when the Winnower looked down and knew that conflict was about to brew, it saw a knife in its hands. The use of the description of something as a knife is, however, a confusing one, as it's related to many things that the Winnower has created, as well as the Winnower itself. The Witness, for example, claimed to be the first knife clutched in its hands, it being the Winnower in that case. So if this is someone claiming to be the knife itself, then perhaps this is actually Oryx speaking here. But I don't think so. Something about that statement doesn't sound quite right. We are the knife itself implies something further. You remember the coalescence of the knife, where the knife is in square brackets again? Yeah, the word knife here has more context, and I think the knife stands for strength, stands for power, undivided and unbroken. I think that the knife here isn't necessarily Oryx. It's the way that each of these statements is made that also makes me doubt that idea. Oryx had an agenda, and he would have referred to a hive, in particular of his sister's brood, with some degree of personable notes that would relate to the hive. But I don't think I see that here. I see something that feels transcendent above the hive. Maybe that's just me reading too much into it, but I'm sure you also see it too. It's here that I also want to focus on something that people might have missed, and it's the line breaks at the start and end of those alternating lines. I promised that I'd talk more about lore formatting stuff here because it's relevant, so here it is. The line breaks here are another lore formatting thing, just like the square brackets from earlier. They appear all over the place in Destiny's lore entries in a few various forms and moments, and in particular there are two ways in which this is found, and I think it's a commentary on the identity of the ones speaking in Barrow-Dyad's lore tab. Let's take a look at some examples. In the Constellations lore book from Season of Dawn, we regularly see a voice that is believed to be the voice of the Traveler or Gardener. This voice is represented in the text by a pair of back-to-back line breaks at the start and end of a sentence, 2 line breaks side by side. These double line breaks are different from the single line breaks we see in Barrow-Dyad, and I think they deliberately imply an increased complexity in contrast. This is in line with the mantra of bomb logic and the light, meaning victory through complexity and life from that complexity. But we also find instances of those single line breaks from Barrow-Dyad, single line breaks that, as I've kind of hinted to, would imply simplicity, the logic of the sword, and the idea that whatever is simplest and sharpest to a point will ultimately be victorious. Those single line break instances that we get also have a lore example from the same year, one season later in Season of the Worthy, in the Trials and Tribulations Trials of Osiris lore book. It's there that we find that the first and last entries have line breaks throughout the text, which sometimes add context or provide an alternate meaning to what is happening. It describes the approach of the Black Fleet and the primal force of darkness that the Witness would bring to the system one season afterwards in the Season of Arrivals. It also describes a force of darkness arriving in Mercury during the collapse and seeding it with the spires that now fill the Caloris Basin, or used to in the times before it was a taken planet. Even to this day, the purpose of these spires is not well understood, but that's beside the point. The single line breaks in these sentences, I think, undoubtedly represent an individual with an incredible degree of dark power, an opposite to the double line breaks we found in Constellations. Are these the Witness's perspective then? Well, maybe, but I doubt it. And the reason I doubt it is because they almost appear to describe the unfolding events in a third-person way, like this is a series of events being described by an onlooker. I don't doubt that the single line breaks represent someone who represents darkness, but I can't 100% be certain of whether this is the Winnower definitely. Although, maybe there is one final way you can interpret all of this. What if we were meant to find the Barrow-Dyad? What if the voice lines in those single breaks are actually talking directly to us? I think that is the case because of that one most important line. Take, live, kill, live. I am here. I am power and I am victory. I am the knife itself. Come, take what you need. Your objective. A new weapon. I think this line might not be speaking to Zur-Kur, and might instead be calling to us. It might in fact represent the signal that we were chasing this entire time. A signal that cuts out whenever the Hive iteration of Zerkur is in control. A signal from whatever controls the Taken part of Zerkur, which was calling out to us from the osseous fragments. I think this primarily because it tells us to do what we must, to take our objective, our new weapon. The implications of this are even more troubling. If we were meant to find the Barrow Dyad, and if we are playing into the hands of the source of the signal, then we're walking directly into a trap by acquiring this weapon. After all, as it states, when everything apparently seems to be said and done in the lore tab, the last line is, "We are the knife." If this is a trap, it's one that might draw us down an entirely different path from the one we have taken thus far. The path of resolve has allowed us a degree of power and control, but the Barrow Dyad hints that there is another way, and I think it is the first step along that path. The Taken Divergence perk on the weapon in particular reads, "This weapon resonates with your choices." I think that matters. As we progress further down the Dyadic Ascension catalyst quest for Barrow Dyad, we also reach a point where we cannot proceed any further, and our path is blocked. The quest step from then on reads, "Acquire the Moment of Clarity upgrade from the Shaping Slab." I think we're about to unlock an even greater understanding of Taken power and an even greater source of it that allows us to forge this weapon into an even more vicious killing machine. I don't know what that moment of clarity is and what we'll uncover as a result of it, but the more I read the lore around all this, the more I am certain that Barrow Dyad is like a guidepost. It is meant to lead us to a conclusion, a perspective, a way of being. It feels like we're trapped in someone else's plan here, and the only thing we can do is continue to walk down that path and hope that we were able to stand to our resolve strong enough that we are not led astray. What the particulars of that plan seem to be and where it leads are anyone's guesses. There is one last note to be made about the weapon itself, though. Take a listen to the part of the Bungie reveal stream from Heresy where they mention Barrow Dyad.
You can also see that this thing auto reloads over time. So this thing, rumor is it's partially sentient.
Yeah.
It has its own wants and needs.
It wants to kill.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you satisfy it, it's going to reward you.
Yeah.
So it turns out that this weapon is indeed alive in a certain sense, and even wants to fulfill its own purpose of devastation. We can even tell that the weapon is alive, and just make that assumption based on the fact that if you look at the damn thing in your weapon inspection screen, it kind of moves. Take a look at the structure inside the ring in particular. Gnarly. It also, of course, has a perk named Panic Response, which is presumably the panic response of the weapon itself when threatened. There was also the confirmation that whilst this isn't a weapon of sorrow, it is a precursor to something. If it is a precursor to any weapon of sorrow, as I've touched on before, given the osseous fragments and the calcified fragments from the Taken King, this is almost certainly a predecessor to the Touch of Malice, a design for a weapon that Oryx enacted so that he might live forever, one that Eris built to punish the Hive, even though it preserved a fragment of Oryx's plan and being. Then again, we don't know much more than this. For now, the weapon remains a mystery which we'll need to go back to and revisit. For the moment, the Barrow Dyad has helped lift the veil on some of the energies behind the Dreadnought, and pushes us closer to the conclusion that there is a greater force that is creating these new Taken. If it does turn out that we were meant to find this weapon, I wonder what choices it might entice us to make, and what the creator of these new Taken has in store for us. Anyway, that's all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Do you think it's the Winnower, or do you think it's Oryx? And tell me this, who do you think has these eyes again? These damn things that keep showing up all over the episode and the specific content for it. If you want more lore content from universes near and far, also don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Porodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.